We'll leave it there. It's a powerful film, and you'll want to see what happens in the following scenes there. But there's a lot to kind of unpack there. First, let's just start with how they started. The age of her mother. She was young. She's only 60. Help us understand that. What are you seeing, and how is that changing? What should we know?
I mean, I think it's relatively uncommon. So probably 95% of the patients that we see do not have this genetic mutation or do not have early onset, usually under the age of 60, or familial Alzheimer's disease. But we have plenty of them, unfortunately, and they are, in my practice, the most tragic patients because, again, they're young, they're in the prime of life, and this horrible brain disease hits them, and also, of course, the caregiver, who I've often talked about as the second patient. One of the things I'm trying to educate doctors about is that if you have an Alzheimer's patient in your practice, whatever their age, you never have just one patient. You have at least two. And you need to pay attention to that second patient, the primary caregiver, at least 50% rate of significant depression, 20 to 30% rates of anxiety and burnout. And as you pointed out very nicely, if something happens to the caregiver, they can't help that patient anymore. So it's in our best interest to really see two patients, the caregiver as well as the identified individual. But the younger individual is relatively uncommon. Maybe you might want to talk about that.
Yeah, so she has a very rare form of this disease, and really when I saw them, it was the diagnosis of talking about the family. And when you go and you start talking to the family and you start figuring out that the uncles, the aunts, a number of other people have this, then that starts putting it into a perspective, and that actually was the way to make the diagnosis and actually crack the case of what was going on. They came in actually with a totally different diagnosis when they initially saw me. So you have to be thinking, you have to be actually on the lookout for some of these kinds of patients because they will present, and they will present at an earlier age.
So if it's rare, but the genetic, the mutation could provide what? The work that you're doing could lead to what?
Right, so we're doing trials, and specifically WashU is going to be, and it is the leader of doing these kinds of trials that are not just nationally, they're internationally, because as you've heard, it's a very rare form, so we have to go scour the whole world to find these kinds of cases. And what they are they're telling us what's going to happen. So when we see Sonia, and then now we see Daisy, we can start to see what's going to happen to them in the future. So we already know that in X number of years, this individual could develop these symptoms, and we can start to track the disease. Because we know when a person walks into the clinic and they're getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, they didn't have it yesterday and now they developed it today. It's a slow process. It's about 15 to 20 years, and we're now starting to see and we're able to detect these changes much earlier in the disease.
Is the knowledge that we're hearing, that we're talking about here, is that commonly known to the folks as they first discover they're dealing with this disease in their family or themselves?
What I was going to piggyback on regarding the age of caregivers and care receivers is that we're seeing over the 15 years that Memory Care Home Solutions has been in existence, younger people are reaching out for help. So we are seeing the baby boomers.
For themselves.
For themselves and for their parents.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So 15 years ago, it was often the 80-year-old spouse who was calling. Now it's really the 60-year-old daughter. It's the people who are more tech savvy, the people who can, they don't have as many issues around denial, and they realize they really need help, and they call, and they say, come see my family now. There's no diagnosis necessary. They just have to realize we're in trouble. Something is wrong. Mom's not acting the same way she was 2 years ago, 10 years ago.
The 60-year-old patient, as you pointed out, is pretty rare.
Yes.
Right, this is a caregiver.
Yes.
Pretty rare, but they still, even finding the services, to her point, 15, 20, 25 years ago, they weren't coming to our door, and now they are coming, and so we got to figure out what to do with them. So we have support groups. We have support groups for early stage Alzheimer's. That's very different than the 85-year-old's experience. They're dealing with work, children at home. It's a very different experience, and we're all having to rise up and respond to that changing kind of diversity.